Hate crimes have been around for a long time in this country. Since the beginning of our nation's history, crimes have been committed because of some motivation of bias. They just haven't been labeled as hate crimes. The term itself is relatively new and first appeared in the mid-1980s. In terms of what really constitutes a hate crime, there are various definitions depending on where you are, what state you're in, and whether you're dealing with a federal definition or a state-level definition. To give you one working definition, the FBI classifies hate crimes as criminal offenses committed against a person or property motivated in whole or in part by the offender's bias against a race, religion, ethnic, national origin group, or sexual orientation group. There are many elements of this definition: race, religion, ethnic, national origin, and sexual orientation. However, this is not necessarily an inclusive definition, as there are other groups that could be included. For example, there's debate over whether the factor of gender should be included in the definition of hate crimes. Some states include gender as a factor, while others do not. Some states will include disability as a factor, while others won't. It really depends on where you are in the country and the relevant laws in that state. There's no absolute definition, which is an important concept to understand. Hate crime attacks are an unusual type of crime. Most crimes are functional in some way. For example, a person's motivated by dislike of someone and acts aggressively against them. Or property is stolen because a perpetrator wants something of value. However, hate crimes are different. When hate crimes involve violence, and they don't always, but when they do, that violence is often excessive. Instead of simply hitting a victim, an attack may escalate to a beating, a shooting, setting the victim on fire, tying their body to a car, dragging them down the road. Hate crimes tend to be spontaneous acts, often committed by young white males. These crimes are not premeditated. Rather, they're often spur-of-the-moment decisions. Additionally, hate crimes are almost always cases that involve more than one offender. Typically, a group of young men will attack a victim, and these attacks are not usually associated with other types of crimes like robbery. The primary motivation is to express rage towards the victim, rather than to steal from them or achieve some other criminal objective. Hate crimes are irrational in that they don't follow the same motivations as other crimes. There's often no direct provocation, and victims are targeted based on perceived group identity rather than any personal interactions. The government began tracking hate crime statistics in the early 1990s. In 1990, the Hate Crime Statistics Act was passed, which required the Department of Justice to track how many hate crimes were committed in the United States. Initially, the FBI kept track of crimes motivated by bias related to race, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. In 1994, that list was expanded to include disability. Each year, there's about 8,000 hate crimes that are reported in the United States. Among reported hate crimes, racial bias is the most common motivation, followed by religious bias, sexual orientation bias, ethnicity, national origin bias, and disability bias. The numbers break down in terms of about 4,300 to 4,400 attacks per year based on race. About 1,500 or so occur because of religious bias. About 1,300 are motivated by sexual orientation bias. 900 motivated by ethnicity or national origin bias. And typically fewer than 50 a year based on disability bias. The ranking of these categories remains consistent year after year. However, certain historical events may cause temporary spikes in particular categories. Most hate crimes involve property damage rather than physical attacks on individuals. The most common type of hate crime is destruction or vandalism to property, followed by intimidation. That means threats of violence. Simple assault and aggravated assault follow, with more severe crimes such as larceny, burglary, robbery, murder, and rape being far less common. Physical attacks are more likely to occur against African Americans and members of the LGBTQ plus community, whereas religious-based hate crimes, particularly against Jewish individuals tend to involve property damage rather than physical violence. Jewish victims frequently experience vandalism, such as swastikas painted on synagogues or the desecration of cemeteries. Hate crime offenders are most commonly white males. However, offenders can come from various racial backgrounds. The majority of hate crimes occur on residential properties, with acts of vandalism, graffiti, or destruction directed at individuals' homes. While the FBI tracks hate crime statistics, the numbers may not fully represent the actual number of hate crimes occurring. There are several challenges in collecting accurate data and factors that lead to underreporting of data. First, not all hate crimes are reported. Victims may choose not to report for various reasons, such as fear of retaliation or reluctance to interact with law enforcement. Second, victims targeted for certain characteristics, for example their sexual orientation, may hesitate because of concerns about societal stigma. Third, it may be difficult to determine a perpetrator's motivation. If an offender does not explicitly state bias during an attack, it can be challenging for law enforcement to categorize an attack as a hate crime. Because of all these challenges, the actual prevalence of hate crimes is likely to be underrepresented in official statistics. In conclusion, hate crimes are a persistent issue in the United States. Although they remain relatively rare compared to other crimes, they are uniquely motivated by bias and often involve excessive violence. Government tracking provides valuable insight, but the data likely underrepresents the true scope of hate crimes. Understanding the motivation and trends behind hate crimes is essential in developing policies and interventions to combat them.